Hey guys, welcome to a journey along the Nile and into the world of ancient Egyptian women. As you settle in for a moment of peace and relaxation, I invite you to share in the comments where in the world you're listening from and what time of day it is. I always love seeing how far our community of night owls extends. If you enjoy immersing yourself in the timeless stories of history to unwind, consider subscribing for more soothing tales like this one. In the dawn of civilization, when the golden sands of the desert met the life-giving waters of the Nile, women of ancient Egypt carried with them a world of secrets. Their daily lives were shaped not only by the rhythm of the river, but also by customs and rituals that to us may seem both strange and fascinating. Unlike the polished images carved into stone walls of temples, the true essence of women's existence was intimate, practical, and deeply human. From the first light of morning, women rose in mud brick houses, their walls painted with faded colours of lotus and papyrus. Hygiene, in a land of heat and dust, was not merely a matter of comfort but of survival. The Nile was their lifeline, a source of water to wash, cleanse and purify. Yet, bathing was not an indulgence. It was an act that carried both spiritual and physical meaning. Women often washed their bodies in shallow pools or ceramic basins, using natron and naturally occurring mineral salt to scrub away dirt and sweat. The sharp, almost bitter scent of natron lingered on their skin, a reminder of its power to cleanse but also to preserve. Perfumed oils played another central role. After cleansing, women massaged their skin with fragrant unguents, pressed from lotus, almond or moringa seeds. These oils not only softened the skin against the harsh desert sun, but also masked the less pleasant odours of daily life. A woman's scent was considered part of her beauty, and perfumed cones of wax, worn atop the head at banquets, slowly melted with the heat, releasing sweet fragrances that mingled with the evening air. Their undergarments were simple, often linen skirts or tunics, sometimes so sheer that the body itself became part of the attire. Cleanliness of these garments mattered deeply. Women washed them by hand in Nile water, scrubbing with clay or natron, then drying them under the blazing sun until the fabric stiffened with heat. Blood, sweat, and the dust of the day left their marks, and so women relied on repeated washings, and sometimes simple cloths tucked discreetly within garments to absorb what could not be spoken of aloud. Even within marriage, certain aspects of hygiene remained unspoken yet essential. Women used linen rags, folded carefully, to manage their cycle's small, secretive rituals that no temple wall would ever depict. These were rinsed in water, sometimes discarded, sometimes reused after drying in the relentless desert air. Such practices were whispered between mothers and daughters, passed like inheritance, yet hidden from men who preferred to imagine their wives as untouched by such earthly realities. But it was not only hygiene that marked their lives. Beauty was power, and power required care. Kohl lined the eyes of noble women and commoners alike, protecting against the glare of the sun while enhancing the dark mystery of their gaze. To the modern mind, these black pigments might appear merely decorative, yet they contained lead-based compounds with antibacterial properties, a secret science woven into vanity. Hair was perfumed, braided, and sometimes covered with wigs of human hair or palm fibres, carefully maintained with combs carved from ivory or wood. The home itself reflected these private worlds. Clay jars of oils, alabaster containers of creams, and woven baskets of cloths were tucked into corners of rooms, each a silent witness to the unspoken routines of women. The scent of incense burned not only for the gods, but also to mask the intimate odours of life, sweat, blood, and the sourness of unwashed cloth. In the land of pyramids and pharaohs, women lived within dual realms, the sacred and the mundane. They were priestesses of the household, guardians of purity, and yet also mortal beings facing the same unglamorous necessities as women across time. Their hygiene, their hidden rituals, and their quiet resilience were threads woven into the grand tapestry of ancient Egypt, unseen, unrecorded, but never absent. And as the Nile flowed eternal, so too did their whispered traditions, carried from mother to daughter, generation after generation, like the river's eternal gift of life. The private chambers of Egyptian women were not places of luxury alone, but also of necessity. Behind the mud brick walls, in courtyards shaded by woven mats, the realities of hygiene unfolded in ways hidden from the grandeur of temple murals. The contrast between public image and private life was sharp. While statues and paintings immortalized women as eternally youthful, perfumed and perfect, their daily existence was filled with struggles against sweat, dirt and the ever-present dust of the desert. Water was both abundant and scarce. The Nile flooded generously each year, but within the households of cities like Memphis or Thebes, clean water had to be fetched, stored and carried in heavy jars. Women often bathed not in the river itself, which was crowded and dangerous, but in large ceramic basins filled bucket by bucket. Privacy was a concern, especially for noble women, whose bodies were shielded from public eyes. In those courtyards, a maid or daughter would pour cool water slowly over the woman's body, while she rubbed her skin with small cloths or natron paste. Linen, the pride of Egypt, played an intimate role in these routines. Spun from the stalks of flax, it was light and breathable, yet it trapped sweat and odours quickly. Women owned multiple sets of linen undergarments, some for daily wear, others for religious or festive occasions. Washing these garments was both labour and ritual. Clay basins filled with Nile water served as makeshift laundry tubs, where women stomped and scrubbed, using natron and sometimes ash to break down stains. The heat of the Egyptian sun baked the fabric dry, bleaching it almost white, though faint traces of stain sometimes lingered. Menstrual cycles brought challenges that demanded discreet solutions. Linen rags folded into simple pads were the most common answer. These cloths were worn beneath tunics, held in place by tightly wrapped belts of fabric. Some were washed and reused, others discarded, depending on a family's wealth. Among wealthier households, perfumed oils were applied to mask unpleasant odours, while poorer women endured as best they could. The silence around these practices was telling, never depicted in tomb art, never mentioned in hymns, yet vital for the rhythm of women's lives. Childbirth too carried its own hidden rituals. Women gave birth squatting on special bricks or supported by attendants, and the mess of blood and afterbirth was absorbed by cloths that were later washed or burned. These birthing bricks, sometimes decorated with images of Hathor or protective deities, remind us that, even in such intimate moments, hygiene and spirituality intertwined. The blood of birth and menstruation was seen as both polluting and powerful, dangerous if uncontrolled, sacred if harnessed. The presence of servants within noble households shaped the routines of hygiene. A maid might be tasked with carrying away soiled cloths, fetching water, or grinding natron into finer powder. Yet this proximity also meant that servants shared in the intimate secrets of their mistresses, becoming silent keepers of routines that would never be spoken aloud. Beyond the walls, public baths as known in later civilizations did not exist. Cleansing was a private duty tied to the home and the family. Incense was burned daily, filling rooms with the smoke of myrrh or frankincense, not only to please the gods but also to cover the earthy odours of sweat, blood and damp linen. Aromatic resins were as much about masking reality as about spirituality. Women's hygiene was not merely functional, it was social. Cleanliness marked status. To smell of lotus oil, to appear in freshly laundered linen, to present oneself without visible stains or disorder was a sign of dignity and wealth. A woman whose garments were soiled, whose body bore the scents of labour, risked being seen as lesser. Thus hygiene, though hidden, was deeply tied to identity and place within the rigid hierarchy of Egyptian society. Yet beneath all these practices lay a simple truth. Ancient Egyptian women, like all women across history, lived between myth and reality. They were idealized as goddesses, yet their daily routines demanded effort, endurance, and small acts of ingenuity. Within the cool shade of their homes, they fought quietly against the desert's harshness, preserving not only their beauty but their very health, ensuring that life, fragile, precious, eternal, could continue along the banks of the Nile. While the hidden rituals of cleanliness preserved women's health in private, the art of beauty defined how they appeared to the world. In ancient Egypt, beauty was more than vanity. It was a language of power, fertility, and even divine favour. Women, whether queens or commoners, devoted careful attention to their appearance, weaving hygiene seamlessly into the artistry of cosmetics and adornment. The mirror of a noblewoman was often a disc of polished bronze or copper, gleaming with the reflection of her kohl-rimmed eyes. Each morning began with a routine that was part medicine, part magic. Kohl ground from galena or malachite was applied carefully around the eyes. To outsiders, it may seem merely a cosmetic flourish, but for Egyptians it was both practical and spiritual. The thick black lines shielded eyes from the blinding sun and desert glare, while also protecting against infections carried by the ever-present flies. The lead salts within the kohl created a mild antibacterial effect, an ancient science hidden beneath ritual. Perfumed oils, stored in alabaster jars and delicate faience containers, were massaged into the skin. Women used these not only after bathing but throughout the day, ensuring that their scent remained pleasant even in the heat. The oils softened dry skin, protected against cracking, and carried with them the perfumes of lotus, frankincense, or myrrh. For wealthier households, servants applied these oils, their hands smoothing fragrant layers onto arms, shoulders, and legs, as though tending to a living statue. Rouge was prepared from red ochre, ground into powder and mixed with fat to create a paste. Applied to cheeks and lips, it gave the appearance of vitality and health, a crucial element in a land where fertility and life were celebrated above all. Women also darkened their brows with soot, and sometimes dyed their nails with henna, staining fingertips and palms with reddish hues that marked festivity and allure. Hair, however, was both a burden and a canvas. The desert sun, relentless and harsh, made hair brittle. Women oiled their locks with castor or moringa oil, braiding them into intricate patterns or covering them with wigs. Wigs themselves were masterpieces crafted from human hair or plant fibres, styled with curls or beads and perfumed with incense. To appear in public with a fine wig was to declare both wealth and refinement, yet beneath this surface lice and dirt posed constant challenges, requiring women to wash their scalps and comb meticulously with ivory or wooden combs. Clothing complemented these adornments. Linen dresses, sometimes sheer and clinging, revealed the silhouette of the body, while in other cases layered fabrics provided modesty and structure. Jewellery necklaces of turquoise, amethyst or lapis lazuli completed the look, their stones believed to carry protective powers as well as aesthetic appeal. Even simple amulets worn beneath garments spoke to a woman's desire to blend hygiene, beauty and magic into one seamless existence. The preparation for social events revealed even more of these intimate routines. Before banquets, women would sit as attendants brushed scented oils into their hair and adjusted their linen dresses. Wax cones of perfumed fat were placed atop the head, slowly melting with the heat of the body, releasing fragrance into the air. To modern eyes, the thought of warm, melting wax seeping into hair may seem unpleasant, but for Egyptians it was both luxurious and symbolic of abundance. Yet even amid this pursuit of beauty, hygiene remained ever present. A woman whose kohl smudged from sweat, whose linen bore stains, or whose perfume could not mask natural odours risked losing face. Thus the art of appearance was not a matter of indulgence alone, but of survival within the social fabric of Egypt. To be beautiful was to be respected, and to be respected was to hold power. And so, within their painted eyes and perfumed skin, Egyptian women carried a delicate balance. The reality of dust, sweat, and hidden cloths intertwined with the illusion of a divine perfection. To the world, they were lotus blossoms, radiant, untouchable, eternal. Yet within the private chambers of their homes, they remained deeply human, their beauty routines built upon the foundation of ordinary hygiene and the unspoken necessities of life. Life for women in ancient Egypt was lived largely within the walls of the home. Though temples and palaces celebrated the grandeur of queens and goddesses, most women's worlds were defined by courtyards, kitchens, and the endless tasks of daily survival. Yet, within this domestic sphere, hygiene remained a constant concern, shaping every moment from the rising of the sun to its setting behind the desert horizon. The preparation of food and water was at the centre of this existence. Bread and beer were staples, but the process of making them was labour-intensive and often unhygienic by modern standards. Women ground grain on stone querns, kneeling for hours as fine dust coated their skin, hair and clothing. This dust carried not only the scent of flour but also grit that wore down teeth over years of consumption. Water, drawn from the Nile and stored in clay jars, was life-giving yet never truly clean. Women filtered it through linen cloths to catch sediment, but microbes and parasites lurked unseen. Stomach ailments, fevers and cramps were common discomforts endured silently, with remedies of herbs, honey, or simply endurance. Cooking itself required constant cleaning. Ovens made of clay filled rooms with smoke and ash, coating walls and bodies. Women wiped sweat from their brows with linen cloths already marked by labour. Flies swarmed over open bowls, and so food was often covered quickly, protected with reeds or cloth. Maintaining even a semblance of cleanliness in this environment was a battle against dust, insects, and the relentless heat. Personal hygiene wove its way through these routines. After grinding grain or preparing fish, women rinsed their hands in basins of water, sometimes rubbing with natron to remove odours. The smell of onions, garlic and fish clung stubbornly, requiring oils to mask it. Servants, in wealthier households, performed these tasks alongside their mistresses, yet even they carried on their skin the marks of labour. Laundry was another central task. The constant need to wash linen garments, menstrual cloths and household fabrics meant that courtyards often echoed with the sound of beating cloth against stone. Women used clay or wooden paddles to pound water into the fabric, then laid the garments across bushes or flat rooftops to dry. The sun bleached them, but it also stiffened them, leaving edges rough against the skin. To soften them, women sometimes rubbed the fabric with oil, though this luxury was rare. Insects and pests added another layer of discomfort. Fleas and lice were persistent enemies. Women combed hair daily, inspecting children's scalps, while mats and bedding were shaken and beaten in attempts to drive out infestations. In wealthier homes, mats were perfumed with resins, while poorer families endured with endurance born of necessity. Rats and mice found their way into grain stores, forcing women to guard food supplies carefully, setting traps or relying on cats, sacred companions in Egyptian households, to keep pests at bay. Even the act of relieving oneself carried a private ritual. Homes lacked the grand latrines of later civilizations. Instead, small clay pots served as chamber vessels, emptied into pits or carried discreetly to the edge of the fields. Women handled this necessity with modesty, covering themselves with linen garments, but the odours of waste were inescapable. Incense burned continuously, disguising the smell of both human life and the clutter of animals, for donkeys, goats and poultry often shared the same courtyards. Cleanliness was thus not an absolute state, but a balance between what was possible and what was practical. A woman might wash herself in the morning, oil her skin and perfume her hair, only to find by midday that sweat, smoke and dust had undone her efforts. Yet the ritual of trying, of maintaining order against chaos, was itself essential. It was in these small acts, rinsing hands, burning incense, folding cloths, that women preserved dignity amid the grit of daily life. To outsiders, Egyptian women may appear only as elegant figures painted in fine lines upon papyrus, forever graceful and divine. But within the walls of their homes, their lives were marked by endless effort to stay clean in an unclean world, to preserve beauty in the face of sweat and labour, to embody ideals that reality constantly threatened to erode. For women of ancient Egypt, cleanliness was never just a matter of comfort or health. It was tied deeply to the sacred, to purity before the gods, to rituals of fertility and to ceremonies that demanded both body and spirit be free from pollution. To be unclean was not only undesirable but dangerous, for it risked offending deities whose favour ensured survival along the Nile. Temples, towering over villages with their stone columns and painted walls, demanded strict purity of those who entered. While priests underwent elaborate daily ablutions, women too performed their own rituals. Before offering food at household shrines or participating in festivals of Hathor or Isis, they bathed in cool water, rubbing their skin with natron until it stung. Natron was more than a cleanser, it symbolized rebirth, used in mummification to preserve the dead and in daily life to cleanse the living. Women sprinkled it in basins, dissolved it in water, or rubbed it directly onto skin, leaving a faint crust that was later washed away. Menstruation, viewed with a mixture of awe and unease, carried special rules. Blood was seen as both powerful and polluting. Women on their cycles were often excused from certain rituals or domestic religious duties, not out of shame but out of recognition of the blood's potent, mysterious force. Some scholars believe they wore protective amulets during these days, invoking Hathor or Taweret, the hippo goddess of childbirth, for safety. In private, they bathed more frequently, rinsing stained cloths in secret, ensuring that no trace lingered to disrupt ritual purity. Childbirth, too, demanded cleansing rites. Women gave birth on special birthing bricks decorated with protective symbols, and once the ordeal was over, they bathed both mother and child in sacred water. The mother's body, marked by blood, sweat, and pain, was anointed with perfumed oils, while incense was burned to ward off malevolent spirits. These rituals blurred the line between hygiene and magic, binding cleanliness with protection. Even daily household worship demanded attention to purity. Before lighting lamps before the household shrine or presenting offerings of bread, beer, and flowers, women washed their hands and faces. The simple act of rinsing with water or wiping with a linen cloth transformed the ordinary into the sacred. To present oneself unclean before the gods was unthinkable, for the gods were believed to dwell among humans, watching not only the grandeur of temples, but the quiet corners of every home. Festivals brought collective rituals of cleansing. During the festival of the Nile's inundation, women bathed in its waters, singing hymns as they splashed, their laughter mingling with the chants of priests. At the festival of Hathor, they adorned themselves with fresh linen, henna-stained hands, and the scent of lotus oil, for cleanliness was not only ritual but celebration. To appear with dirty garments or unwashed hair was a sign of disrespect both to the goddess and to the community. Death itself revealed how deeply these ideas of purity shaped life. Women prepared the bodies of loved ones by washing them with water and natron, perfuming them with resins, and wrapping them in linen. The same materials that cleansed their own bodies in life now preserved them for eternity. A woman who had folded menstrual rags or scrubbed sweat-stained linen in life might one day find her own body bathed into the same way, a final cleansing before joining the gods. Thus, the line between ordinary hygiene and sacred ritual was never distinct. Washing, oiling, perfuming, and cleansing were acts repeated daily, yet in the Egyptian mind each act carried a resonance far beyond the physical. For women, guardians of the household and keepers of fertility, these rituals were essential, binding them to the gods and to the eternal flow of the Nile itself. Beneath the golden mask of temples and divine imagery, the private lives of Egyptian women were shaped by love, passion, and the quiet necessities of intimacy. Just as hygiene governed daily survival and ritual purity, it also extended into the hidden world of relationships, fertility, and physical closeness. These matters, rarely carved in stone or written in papyrus, lived in whispers between women, in the practices passed from mother to daughter, and in the artifacts left behind in tombs. Marriage in ancient Egypt was less a ceremony than a practical arrangement, but affection and desire played a role nonetheless. Husbands and wives shared chambers, and intimacy was considered natural, even blessed by the gods. Yet, the act of closeness demanded preparation. Women cleansed themselves beforehand with perfumed oils and water, sometimes using natron to scrub away sweat. The goal was not only physical cleanliness, but to present oneself as desirable, radiant, and worthy of affection. Perfume was central to these preparations. Archaeologists have discovered alabaster jars still holding traces of myrrh, frankincense, and lotus oils in tombs, suggesting how deeply scents were tied to intimacy. The woman's fragrance was more than decoration. It was a lure, masking the inevitable odours of sweat, labour, and menstrual cycles. During feasts and festivals, women wore cones of perfumed fat atop their heads, slowly melting to release fragrance not only for the public eye, but also for the private bedchamber. Birth control, though rarely spoken of openly, left traces in historical sources. Medical papyri, such as the Kahun papyrus, reveal recipes for contraceptives, mixtures of honey, natron, and even crocodile dung inserted vaginally to block conception. While these methods may seem crude, they reflect the ingenuity of women striving to control fertility and manage the risks of constant pregnancy. After such practices, cleansing was vital. Women rinsed with water or wiped with linen cloth soaked in oils or wine, combining practical hygiene with ritual acts of purification. Fertility itself was surrounded by rituals and practices of cleanliness. Women desiring children wore amulets of Hathor, goddess of love, or Taweret, protector of childbirth, and bathed in sacred water before making offerings. Yet once conception occurred, hygiene became both more difficult and more important. Pregnancy brought discomfort, sweating and discharge, and women relied on cloths, oils and frequent rinsing to preserve dignity. Midwives, often other women within the household, assisted with advice and remedies, sometimes applying herbal salves or perfumed cloths to ease irritation. Menstruation, intimacy, and fertility overlapped in complex ways. While menstruating women were often restricted from certain rituals, they also carried an aura of power. Some traditions suggest that menstrual blood, though hidden, was believed to hold magical potency, used in spells or protective charms. Women navigated these beliefs cautiously, balancing modesty with the silent acknowledgement of their own unique strength. For noble women and queens, intimacy carried political weight. A queen's ability to bear children, especially sons, was vital to dynastic survival. Thus, her hygiene and fertility were matters of state, supported by attendants who prepared perfume baths, oils, and special diets rich in figs, dates, and honey foods believed to strengthen fertility. Even in the private chambers of palaces, where stone floors cooled the air and incense burned constantly, the reality of female hygiene remained ever present. Cloths to manage bleeding, oils to soften skin, and servants entrusted with secrets too delicate for the written record. In popular culture, intimacy was celebrated openly. Love poems inscribed on ostraca speak of longing, kisses, and the beauty of a woman's scent or hair. Yet behind such poetic imagery lay the simple routines of washing, oiling, and perfuming that made closeness possible in a hot, dusty world. Without these quiet acts of care, the poetry would have withered under the reality of sweat and labour. Thus, intimacy in ancient Egypt was not merely physical, it was bound to hygiene, fertility, and even the gods. Every touch, every embrace was framed by unseen routines. A basin of water, a folded cloth, a jar of perfume. For women, these preparations were as essential as the act itself, ensuring that desire and respect could flourish side by side in the eternal dance of life along the Nile. Life along the Nile was sustained by fertility of land, animals, and women. For an Egyptian woman, pregnancy was both a blessing and a burden, celebrated in art yet fraught with danger and reality. To give life meant stepping into a sacred role, but it also meant enduring discomfort, uncertainty, and the constant necessity of bodily care. Hygiene, rituals, and the aid of midwives formed the fragile shield that protected both mother and child. From the earliest months of pregnancy, women altered their routines. Baths in cool water became more frequent, easing the swelling of legs and the weight of heat. Oils of moringa and castor were rubbed into the skin to soothe dryness and prevent irritation, while linen cloths were placed under garments to absorb discharge. Perfume, once used to attract lovers, now served to comfort and mask the scents of the changing body. Medical papyri, such as the Ebers papyrus, describe remedies for pregnancy discomfort, honey mixed with herbs to ease nausea, or garlic and figs to strengthen the womb. Women were advised to avoid certain foods, while amulets of the goddess Taweret, the hippopotamus-shaped protector of mothers, were worn on cords around the neck. The goddess was a constant companion in childbirth, her image carved into ivory wands and painted onto household shrines. When labour approached, preparations intensified. Midwives, almost always older women with experience, were summoned. These attendants carried bowls of water, cloths and oils, knowing that cleanliness could make the difference between life and death. Floors were washed, incense burned to drive away evil spirits, and charms were recited to call upon Hathor and Isis, goddesses who themselves embodied the roles of mother and nurturer. Childbirth took place not in silence, but in rhythm. Women often gave birth squatting on special birthing stools, with openings to allow the baby to pass through. These stools, some of which survive in museums, were washed with water and sometimes rubbed with oil to reduce friction. To ease pain, hot water was poured into basins, and linen cloths soaked in herbs were applied to the belly. The atmosphere was both practical and spiritual, part clinic, part temple. Blood, inevitable and feared, was managed with absorbent cloths. Servants or attendants rinsed these in water afterward, sometimes burying them discreetly, as menstrual and birth blood alike carried a mixture of danger and power. The linen itself symbolized purity, transforming a messy reality into a manageable ritual. For noble women, childbirth had added ceremony. Offerings were made to temples, prayers spoken over the expectant mother, and more attendants surrounded her chamber, yet no wealth could shield her from the risks of labour. The deaths of young queens recorded in history remind us of the fragile balance women faced, even when surrounded by luxury. Once the child was born, purification began immediately. The infant was washed with water, anointed with oils, and swaddled in linen strips. The mother, too, was cleansed. She bathed in warm water infused with herbs like fenugreek or chamomile to reduce pain and swelling. Midwives massaged her with oil to restore circulation and bound her abdomen with linen for support. Breastfeeding was both natural and sacred. Reliefs show Isis nursing Horus, a divine model for all Egyptian mothers. Yet breastfeeding also demanded hygiene. Women washed their breasts with water, rubbed them with honey to prevent cracking, and sometimes applied herbal salves if infection threatened. In wealthier households, wet nurses assisted, but the rituals of cleansing and care were the same. Motherhood did not end with birth. Protective amulets were tied near the cradle, herbs burned to ward off illness, and mothers remained in a period of ritual seclusion, cleansing themselves before rejoining household duties. This practice reflected both hygiene and belief, a time to heal, restore strength, and purify. Thus, in the hidden chambers of houses along the Nile, motherhood unfolded as a blend of devotion and endurance. Every cry of a newborn was preceded by hours of labour, every safe delivery the result of cloths, oils, and whispered prayers. And behind it all stood the women themselves, mothers, midwives, daughters, guardians of life and keepers of rituals too intimate to be carved in stone, yet vital to the survival of Egypt itself. To walk the streets of Thebes or Memphis in the midday sun was to step into a living mosaic of colour, fabric, and fragrance. Egyptian women, whether noble or humble, dressed and adorned themselves not only for appearance but for protection, comfort, and hygiene. Their choices of linen, cosmetics, and daily rituals reveal a culture where beauty and cleanliness were woven into the fabric of life. The foundation of every woman's wardrobe was linen. Egypt's climate made wool undesirable, considered unclean and associated with foreign peoples. Linen, spun from the flax plant, was light, breathable, and washable, making it the ideal material for daily wear. Women of modest means wore simple, straight dresses sleeveless, with straps over the shoulders. These garments were often white, reflecting both the brightness of the sun and the Egyptian association of whiteness with purity. Noble women, however, turned linen into art. Their gowns clung tightly to the body, sometimes pleated or layered in fine folds. Some were translucent, designed to display jewellery beneath. Stiffened collars, known as veseks, decorated the neckline, crafted from faience beads or semi-precious stones. Even these garments were maintained with care, washed frequently in Nile water, beaten with lye-based soap, and dried in the sun. Servants might starch them slightly to hold their shape, creating a crisp appearance that suggested both wealth and discipline. Clothing was incomplete without adornment. Jewellery, far from being mere luxury, served hygienic and protective purposes. Amulets carved from carnelian, turquoise, or lapis were strung onto necklaces believed to guard the body against disease. Copper or gold bracelets circled wrists and ankles, their smooth surfaces easier to clean than cloth. Even earrings, a sign of beauty, were sometimes designed to hold drops of perfumed resin that released a subtle fragrance throughout the day. Cosmetics were equally vital. Kohl, the black eye paint that defines Egyptian art, was more than decoration. It protected the eyes from the sun's glare and repelled flies, reducing the risk of infection. Women prepared kohl at home, grinding galena, lead sulfide, into fine powder, mixing it with fat or oil and applying it with slender sticks of ivory or wood. The daily act of painting the eyes was both cosmetic and medicinal, a fusion of beauty and hygiene. Rouge, made from red ochre, coloured lips and cheeks, while green malachite powder highlighted eyelids. Perfumed oils softened skin, masking sweat and protecting against the desert dryness. The most valued oils were infused with myrrh, lotus or cinnamon, stored in delicate alabaster jars. Daily bathing washed away dust, but oiling the body afterward ensured that skin remained supple and resilient. Hair, too, demanded attention. Wealthy women often wore elaborate wigs made from human hair or plant fibres, which could be cleaned, scented, and styled more easily than natural hair. Real hair was washed with water, treated with combs of wood or bone, and perfumed with oils to deter lice. Some shaved their heads entirely, preferring wigs that could be kept in better hygienic condition. This practical choice doubled as fashion, blending necessity with elegance. Even footwear bore a mark of hygiene. Sandals, often woven from papyrus or palm fibres, protected the feet from the scorching ground. For ceremonies, noble women wore leather or gilded sandals, yet within homes most went barefoot, washing feet frequently in basins of cool water to prevent sores or infection. The morning routine of a noble woman might begin with a bath, followed by the donning of fresh linen, the painting of eyes, and the careful layering of jewellery. Servants fanned incense to perfume the chamber, while oils were massaged into her skin. These were not merely acts of vanity, but expressions of social identity and sacred order. To appear clean, perfumed, and adorned was to reflect marked harmony, balance, and civilization itself. Even ordinary women, with simpler means, engaged in these rituals. A clay pot of malachite, a simple necklace of faience, a freshly washed linen dress, these small luxuries gave dignity to life. Hygiene and beauty were not privileges but expectations, shaping the way Egyptian women presented themselves in both temple and marketplace. Thus, beauty in ancient Egypt was inseparable from health, and fashion was inseparable from hygiene. Each line of coal, each fold of linen, each drop of perfumed oil was part of a deeper ritual, the daily renewal of the body against time, heat, and mortality. In this, Egyptian women transformed necessity into art, crafting a legacy that still captivates across the centuries. In the ancient world, where gods ruled every element of existence, the human body was not only flesh, but also a vessel of the divine. For Egyptian women, personal cleanliness extended beyond daily bathing or beauty. It was an act of worship, a preparation of the body for communication with the sacred. Ritual purification, conducted at home and within temples, linked hygiene with the eternal order of the cosmos mat. Daily life revolved around cycles of cleansing. Before entering shrines or participating in religious ceremonies, women washed thoroughly, often using water drawn directly from the Nile, believed to carry the blessing of Hapi, the river god. Bathing removed not just physical dust, but spiritual impurity. Noble women and priestesses sometimes immersed themselves multiple times a day, rising from the water like reborn initiates. Priestesses of Hathor or Isis, in particular, adhered to strict routines. Records suggest they shaved their bodies to maintain ritual purity, preventing lice or dirt from interfering with their duties. They washed in basins of cool water, perfumed with lotus petals or frankincense, then anointed themselves with oils. Linen garments, freshly laundered, completed the cycle-white fabric symbolizing renewal and divine order. Menstrual blood, regarded as both powerful and potentially polluting, required its own rituals. Women abstained from certain temple duties during menstruation, observing seclusion not simply for hygiene but for spiritual alignment. Linen cloths used during this time were discreetly washed, sometimes buried, acknowledging the blood as sacred yet dangerous. Some magical spells even reference menstrual blood as a source of protection against evil forces, illustrating its dual nature in Egyptian thought. Bathing was often accompanied by prayer. As water poured over the body, women recited invocations to Isis or Ma'at, seeking purity of heart as well as flesh. In wealthier households, purification chambers were constructed small rooms with stone basins and drainage channels. Servants assisted in these ablutions, filling basins with warm water, scrubbing floors, and burning incense to sanctify the act. The use of natron, a natural mineral salt found in Egyptian deserts, was central to purification. Mixed with water, natron cleansed skin and neutralized odors. Women rubbed it over their bodies before sacred rituals, much as it was used in mummification to preserve the dead. This connection between the living and the eternal reinforced the belief that cleansing aligned the mortal body with the divine order. Perfume also played a spiritual role. Cones of scented wax were sometimes worn atop the head, slowly melting in the heat and releasing fragrance throughout ceremonies. The smell itself was thought to please the gods, transforming the worshipper into a living offering. Women burned kaifi, a blend of wine, honey, raisins, myrrh, and herbs, its smoke enveloping them in a veil of sanctity. In funerary practices, women continued their role as guardians of purity. Mourning rituals often involved ritual washing of the deceased, carried out by female relatives. Professional mourners too underwent cleansing before entering tombs, ensuring their laments were pure before the gods. Even in death, hygiene and spirituality were intertwined. Thus, ritual cleansing was not an isolated act, but a cycle of devotion. Each wash, each anointing of oil, each freshly laundered linen was an offering to both the body and the gods. For Egyptian women, purity was not only about health or beauty, it was a bridge to the divine, a way to live in harmony with Mut, and a means of transforming the fragile human body into something eternal. In the golden floodplains of the Nile, food was more than survival. It was medicine, ritual, and a key to bodily balance. Egyptian women lived in a land where the rhythm of the river determined abundance, and their diets reflected both practical needs and deep cultural beliefs. To eat was to nurture not only the body but the spirit, and every meal had implications for health and hygiene. The staple of daily life was bread and beer. Bread made from emmer wheat or barley was baked in clay ovens and consumed in nearly every household. Women ground the grain on stone querns, a laborious process that left traces of grit in the flour. Over time, this wore down teeth, leading to dental problems, but bread remained central, sometimes flavoured with honey, dates or herbs. Beer, thick and nutritious, was brewed at home, often by women, and provided hydration safer than stagnant water. Vegetables formed the second pillar of the diet. Onions, garlic and leeks were essential not only for flavour but for their believed medicinal properties. Garlic, in particular, was thought to strengthen the body and protect against illness. Lentils, chickpeas and fava beans provided protein, while cucumbers and lettuce offered refreshment in the desert heat. Women often grew these in small household gardens, ensuring daily access to fresh food. Fruit was both luxury and hygiene. Dates, figs and pomegranates cleansed the digestive system and provided sweetness. Melons, cooling and hydrating, were prized in the summer months. Grapes, eaten fresh or dried as raisins, doubled as offerings to the gods. Honey, the only natural sweetener, was used sparingly. Its antiseptic properties also made it a treatment for wounds and infections. Meat was less common, consumed mostly by the wealthy. Beef, goat and poultry were enjoyed at banquets, while fish from the Nile was more widely available. Yet concerns about ritual purity influenced eating habits. Certain fish were avoided in temple contexts, believed to be unclean. For women serving as priestesses, dietary restrictions could be strict, limiting them to bread, fruit and vegetables before ceremonies. Cleanliness extended to food preparation. Grains were sifted carefully, water boiled for brewing and clay vessels scrubbed with sand or natron. Noble households employed servants to maintain kitchens, but even common women practiced careful hygiene, washing utensils and storing food in sealed jars to ward off pests. Spoiled food was associated not only with sickness, but with spiritual imbalance. To eat impure food was to risk offending the gods. Pregnant women followed specific dietary practices. Medical papyri recommend honey mixed with milk to strengthen the womb, or dates to ease labour. Figs and pomegranates were symbols of fertility, often consumed during rituals. Mothers were encouraged to eat plenty of vegetables and grains, avoiding heavy meat that might disturb digestion. These beliefs blended practical nutrition with spiritual care. Festivals introduced indulgence. During religious feasts, women prepared cakes sweetened with honey and flavoured with sesame. Wine, usually reserved for the wealthy, flowed more freely, though even then it was accompanied by rituals of cleansing afterward. To overindulge without purification was seen as dangerous both physically and spiritually. Thus, the Egyptian woman's diet was not accidental but deliberate. Each onion peeled, each loaf baked, each sip of beer was an act of maintaining balance in body and soul. Hygiene and nourishment merged at the table, shaping lives with rhythms as steady as the Nile itself. In the sunlit courtyards of Egyptian homes, the rhythms of daily hygiene echoed as clearly as the songs of birds along the Nile. For women, who were guardians of the household, cleanliness was not merely a chore but a sacred duty. Within mud-brick walls, the home became a private sanctuary where water, cloth and ritual sustained the health of families and preserved harmony with the gods. Water was life. Drawn from the Nile or local canals, It was carried in clay jars balanced on women's shoulders, often by servants or daughters of the house. For wealthier households, servants fetched fresh water daily, pouring it into stone basins in courtyards or chambers. Women washed their hands and faces in the cool mornings, splashing away the dust of sleep, and in the evenings rinsed feet and skin before bed. Frequent washing was necessary in the desert climate, where heat and sand clung to every surface. Bathing was a regular practice, though not with the luxury of Roman baths centuries later. Women filled large basins with water, sometimes warmed in the sun, and cleansed their bodies using cloths or sponges made from reeds. Soap, in a primitive form, was prepared by mixing natron or ash with animal fat, creating a lathering substance that lifted dirt and absorbed oils. After washing, they anointed their skin with scented oils to restore softness and prevent dryness. Clothing care was equally important. Linen garments absorbed sweat and dust, requiring frequent washing. Women beat them with stones, scrubbed them in water, and sometimes bleached them in the sun. Noble households employed laundresses who specialized in treating delicate fabrics, ensuring that garments remained both clean and white, the very color associated with matte purity and order. Inside the home, cleanliness extended to the very air. Incense burned daily, purified rooms and masked unpleasant odors. Storerooms were swept to keep grain free from vermin, while clay jars were sealed with mud or wax to protect against contamination. Floors of compacted earth were washed with water, and reeds were strewn to absorb dampness, then replaced regularly. Drinking water demanded special care. To make it safer, Egyptians filtered water through cloth to remove sediment. Some boiled it before brewing beer, reducing the risk of illness. Wealthy families sometimes flavoured water with herbs or cooled it in porous jars, which allowed evaporation to chill the liquid. These practices reveal a remarkable awareness of hygiene long before the science of microbes was known. Even cosmetics and personal tools were kept with ritual precision. Coal containers, combs, razors and mirrors were cleaned after use and stored in decorated boxes. Servants ensured that oils and perfumes were fresh, replacing them before they spoiled. This discipline not only prevented infections, but also reinforced the sense of order upon which Egyptian life depended. For noble women, bathing could take on ceremonial grandeur. Servants poured water over them from elegant jugs, while others fanned away insects with palm leaves. Floors were sprinkled with flower petals, and towels of fine linen awaited them. Yet even in humble homes, the act of washing was tinged with sacred meaning. To cleanse the body was to refresh the spirit, and every splash of water echoed with the eternal flow of the Nile. Thus, the Egyptian household was both shelter and sanctuary. Women orchestrated its rhythms of washing, purifying and preserving, ensuring that the family lived not only in health, but in harmony. In this way, the home itself became a temple in hygiene, an unspoken prayer to life. In ancient Egypt, where the desert winds carried both life and danger, illness was seen as a shadow that touched every household. For women, who bore the roles of mothers, wives, and keepers of the home, staying healthy was essential. Hygiene was the first defense, but when sickness threatened, knowledge of medicine, a blend of practical remedies, ritual, and divine invocation became their shield. The Egyptians believed that disease entered through impurities, both physical and spiritual. Dust in wounds, spoiled food, foul odours all were thought to invite illness. Thus, daily cleansing was not just for appearance, but for survival. Women washed hands before preparing food, cleaned wounds with honey or resin, and avoided stagnant water where pests bred. Simple precautions reduced infection. Though they were understood in spiritual terms, cleanliness honoured the gods and kept evil spirits at bay. Physicians, Swindatibalu, respected and often attached to temples, offered guidance. Many were men, but records mention wise women who served as healers, midwives, and herbalists. They studied medical papyri like the Ebers Papyrus or Kahun Gynecological Papyrus, which preserved hundreds of remedies. These texts reveal an astonishing awareness of hygiene, treatments for urinary tract infections, advice for menstrual care, and instructions for safe childbirth. Herbal remedies were central. Garlic and onions strengthened the body and fought infections. Honey, with its antibacterial qualities, was spread on wounds to prevent decay. Castor oil treated constipation, while fenugreek soothed the stomach. Women brewed teas of chamomile and mint for fevers, and lotus seeds were chewed to calm nerves. These treatments were accompanied by prayers or spells, blending science with faith. Magical protection also formed part of hygiene. Amulets carved with the Eye of Horus or the image of Tower were worn to protect against illness. Women sometimes carried small figurines of Bes, the dwarf god who defended homes and children from evil spirits. Even medical prescriptions often combined practical remedies with incantations, acknowledging both the body and the soul. Epidemics and household illness were constant threats. To guard against them, incense was burned daily, thought to cleanse the air. Natron, used for washing clothes and bodies, also served to disinfect wounds. Water jars were scrubbed regularly, and stale food was discarded quickly. Women knew that rot bred sickness, and their vigilance kept families safe. Pregnancy and childbirth required special medical attention. Midwives carried herbs and cloths, sometimes using honey-soaked gauze to prevent infections after birth. The Kahun Papyrus contains prescriptions for vaginal treatments, including herbal pessaries to combat infection, evidence of remarkable early gynecological knowledge. Noble women had a greater access to physicians, who travelled to their estates with chests of ointments and instruments. Common women relied more on home remedies, passed from mother to daughter. Yet both shared the same principle. Health was inseparable from cleanliness. A well-kept home, fresh water, and daily washing were as important as any potion. Even in death, hygiene reflected medical wisdom. Bodies were washed with natron before mummification, echoing the practices of the living. Death was not seen as failure but as transition, and the care of the body remained essential to ensure safe passage into eternity. Thus, Egyptian women lived at the crossroads of healing and ritual. By washing wounds, preparing herbs, and reciting prayers, they protected their families from the unseen. Their knowledge, drawn from papyri, experience, and devotion, laid the foundations of medicine as we know it. For them, every act of hygiene was both practical science and sacred art, a legacy that endures in whispers through time. Behind the high mud brick walls of Egyptian villas and palaces, life was carefully orchestrated. Noble women, adorned in linen and jewellery, appeared to live lives of effortless beauty. Yet behind every polished floor and perfumed chamber stood the tireless labour of servants and maids. These women, often invisible in records yet essential in reality, were the unseen guardians of household hygiene. For noble women, daily routines of cleanliness began with service. At dawn, maids filled basins with fresh water, carried in heavy jars from the Nile. They prepared cloths, oils, and cosmetics, laying them neatly on decorated boxes or vanity tables. Some fanned their mistresses with palm leaves as others washed floors or sprinkled reeds to absorb moisture. In wealthier homes, entire groups of servants specialised in different tasks: laundresses for linen, perfumers for oils, cooks for hygienic food preparation. Bathing was often a ritual attended by servants. A noblewoman sat on a low stool while maids poured cool or warmed water over her, catching the runoff in shallow basins. Others massaged her skin with natron or oils, scrubbing gently with linen cloths. Afterward, towels of fine fabric dried the body, while perfumes and jewellery completed the transformation. Such rituals reflected not only luxury, but the Egyptian devotion to cleanliness as a marker of civilization. Laundresses were indispensable. They carried garments to the riverbank, beating them with smooth stones, scrubbing with natron or lye, and rinsing them in the current. Once dried in the sun, the garments were carefully folded and returned. This constant labour kept linen garments, the foundation of Egyptian clothing, fresh and white. For noble households, spotless linen was not simply comfort, it was a symbol of purity and status. Servants also tended to menstrual hygiene. Maids discreetly washed blood-stained cloths, or prepared basins of warm water for their mistresses. They burned incense to mask odours and ensured privacy within the household. Such tasks, though hidden, were vital to maintaining dignity and comfort in a society where purity carried sacred significance. Food preparation demanded vigilance. Maids washed vegetables, sifted grains, and filtered water through linen cloths. They scrubbed clay jars, sealed them with wax, and burned herbs to repel pests. In noble kitchens, teams of women worked together, maintaining not only flavour but hygiene. Without their diligence, illness could spread quickly in the heat of Egypt. In funerary rituals, maids played roles as mourners and cleansers. They washed the body of their mistress, anointing it with oils before the embalmers arrived. Some served as professional mourners, wailing and beating their breasts, a reminder that the duty of women extended from birth to death. Yet these servants were not merely passive. Their knowledge of herbs, oils, and cleansing methods often surpassed that of their mistresses. Many came from generations of women who had passed down the secrets of healing and hygiene. In their hands, the household became a sanctuary of order, its rhythms sustained not by wealth alone, but by skill and devotion. Thus, while history celebrates queens and noblewomen, it was often the servants who preserved health, comfort, and dignity. They were the hidden hands of hygiene, the silent keepers of order, and the unseen foundation of Egyptian domestic life. From the banks of the Nile to the painted walls of tombs, the life of Egyptian women was shaped by rituals of purity, order, and hidden traditions. Cleanliness for them was never merely about survival in the desert heat. It was a philosophy, a spiritual law that touched every corner of existence. In their homes, daily bathing in the cool waters of the Nile or in clay basins reflected a rhythm of renewal. Linen cloths, carefully washed with natron and dried in the sun, clothed their bodies in whiteness, a symbol of both purity and civilization. Perfumed oils softened their skin against the harsh desert air, while kohl lined their eyes, protecting them from glare and infection. Every gesture, from combing hair to washing hands, was a reminder that beauty and hygiene were inseparable. Yet behind this graceful image lay countless hidden practices. Menstrual cloths, herbal remedies, and discreet methods of bodily care revealed an intimate knowledge of health that women passed from mother to daughter. Even the poorest women, who had no servants or perfumes, shared this devotion. A pot of water, a strip of linen, or a simple herb could carry the same meaning of sacred cleansing as the gilded baths of queens. The connection between hygiene and spirituality ran deep. To the Egyptians, purity was not only a physical state, but also a moral and cosmic duty. Women washed before entering temples, midwives purified mothers and infants, and mourners cleansed the dead before the soul's journey to the afterlife. In every stage of life, birth, marriage, menstruation, motherhood, and death rituals of cleanliness were woven into the fabric of existence. Servants and maids, though rarely named in history, formed the unseen foundation of this order. Their labour, scrubbing floors, laundering linen, and preparing oils, allowed noblewomen to embody the elegance we still admire in tomb paintings and sculptures. Their silent care preserved health, dignity, and comfort in households both grand and modest. Over centuries, these practices echoed into cultural memory. Greek and Roman travellers marvelled at Egyptian devotion to bathing, oils, and perfumes. Even today, when we imagine ancient Egypt, we recall not only pyramids and pharaohs, but also the white garments, the kohl-lined eyes, and the aura of grace, all born of rituals of cleanliness. In truth, the story of Egyptian women's hygiene is more than a tale of soap, water, or cloth. It is a story of resilience in a land of dust and heat, a quiet wisdom in a society ruled by gods and kings, and of the eternal strength of women whose lives were guided by hidden rhythms. Thus, the legacy of Egyptian women lives on not only in stone statues or hieroglyphs, but in the unseen gestures of care that shaped their world. Every drop of water poured, every cloth laundered, every herb burned, and every hidden ritual whispered in the silence of homes carried within it the essence of Egypt's most enduring treasure, the balance of body, spirit, and cosmos. And so, across the millennia, their devotion to purity remains an eternal echo, reminding us that history is not only carved in stone but lived in the quiet, daily acts of women who sustained a civilization. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey through ancient Egypt. I hope these quiet stories of women's lives brought you calm and curiosity. If you'd like more soothing history to drift away with, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, may your night be peaceful and your dreams soft as the Nile's waters.